I'm not here as a pastor, I'm not here as a warden. I don't think there's any more important conversation that we could have in our community than the one that's happened in tonight. I'm here as a person who grew up in a home that was deeply marked by addiction. Huge impact on my life as a boy. I'm also a person who has struggled with addiction throughout my life. I've struggled with at least 3 addictions. And people can be very high functioning in community and still struggle with addiction. I learned that addiction was not my problem. It was a problem that I created for myself so that I didn't have my real problem, which was some incredibly painful stories of abandonment in childhood. Also an experience of abuse, sexual abuse when I was 11 years old. And so often addiction can develop out of early childhood trauma. It can happen around abandonment, neglect, and abuse. And so I'm here as a person who has been deeply victimized by addiction in my own childhood. But I'm also here as a person who's struggled with at least 3 addictions throughout my life. And addictions affect everyone. The person who's addicted, it affects the family, it affects relationships, it affects all sorts of things. And there's socially acceptable addictions like work. And there's substance addictions, pornography, sexual addiction is rampant. These things have a profound impact on marriages, family. And so I'm here as a person who's very deeply vested in this conversation, as a person who's touched by it very deeply. You tell me, is there anybody in this community who isn't touched in some way by this issue of addiction? There's not one of us here who isn't touched by it, either in our immediate families or knows somebody whose life has been deeply impacted by addiction. So I'm glad to be here as a part of the community conversation. And I don't mind sharing my story. I would even go so far as to say I'm currently doing group therapy around dealing with some of my own childhood stuff. So we're all vulnerable in life to being damaged as young boys and young girls. So how we deal with that becomes a deep subject. And so I'm just making myself vulnerable because Terry's coming to share his story, and that's why we're here tonight, to have conversations about what's real in all of our lives. So Terry, without any further ado, the microphone is yours, and you're the expert on your own experience. Don't be afraid to live rich and thick and deep in your own story. We're glad you're here.
All right, check if this is on. I'm sure I'll be loud enough anyway, but I like the setup too better than the podium. Sounds like I'm out there waiting for a sentence. I come to share my story and hope to give awareness to other people about what addiction is. And a lot of people think it's a character defect or a lack of willpower or a lack of trying or caring, and it's not that. It's just it becomes a way of dealing with life because we didn't know how to do it, and dealing with traumas and different stuff that we weren't able to do as children. And when I had my first drink, it was like bang, I fit in, and I spent my whole life trying to fit in and never really felt I did. It was like jamming a square peg into a round hole. I just always never, but when I had that first drink, I did. And I loved it. And I just immediately become the life of the party, and I had a blast till I didn't. And I want to start by sharing how addiction affected my family before I even knew it. My father wasn't an alcoholic, but I do think he could have been. But he never succumbed to it because he see what it done to his family. He pulled his father out of a truck when he was 7 or 8 years old. He had killed himself, gassed himself, was an alcoholic. And that profoundly affected my father throughout the rest of his life. And he dealt with it all on his own. And he never talked to anybody about it. And he never dealt with it. And that affected me in our relationship, because Dad wasn't a bad father at all, but he was 10 times the father his father was. But because of addiction, because of alcoholism, he never got a father. So he had to learn how to be one, and he never had nothing to go by. And I think growing up, one of the first things I remember that when I was going to school and stuff, I just never really fit in, and I was always a bright child. Like my parents, I could speak Spanish, like count to 6, and when I was 3, and I think I can only count to 5 now. But at the time, I was like, I loved to learn, I loved to retain information. And the first day, I couldn't wait to go to school. I do remember that. And the first day I went, I had white pants on, and I was a kid. It didn't matter what I got into, it got on me. And I remember my parents saying, when he comes home, you're gonna have to throw them pants in the garbage. And I came home, there wasn't a speck on them. It was almost, my father had told me after, it looked like I was in shell shock. I didn't know how to fit in, kind of, and it just shocked me, all the people, all the kids, and I don't remember much about that first day, if anything. I just know I didn't really fit in. And as I got older, like in school, like 7, 8 or whatever, I was bullied. And one day, I never ever fought back, and I was always a strong kid, but I just didn't, because I didn't want to hurt anybody, and I didn't really care at the time. I didn't know any different, but I remember getting off the school bus, and 3 kids were beating on me, and I was just letting them, and Dad see it, and he was savage at me. He said, "Why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you protect yourself?" And he said, "You got to stand up for yourself." So the next day, when I went to school, I beat up one of the kids, and I took handfuls of hair out of his head. And I remembered that I thought that's what I had to do. My father was so disappointed that I didn't do that. So I thought, and that's what he thought, because he didn't know how to talk about his trauma or what. He just knew fight. That's what Dad knew. That's what he did. And he fought for what he thought was right. He always did. But he never knew the other side of it. And that's something I learned in recovery. You know, my father died young. He was 58, I want to say 59. He was just shy of 60. And he died of cancer. And I think a lot of it was stress, because he was going through a lot of hard things in his own mind. I remember me and my brother were talking about, he looked at my brother when he was 11 and said, "You know, your head's going to play tricks on you, and it's going to tell you things, and you got to fight your mind, and you got to fight what you believe in, and you got to keep yourself sane. Your mind will make you go in different directions, and you have to fight against it." My brother's sitting there, I'm 11. But we know now that he was probably going through something at that time. And he wouldn't go talk to a therapist. He wouldn't go talk to somebody about it, because to him that was weakness. It was his job to handle that, to deal with that. And that's what I thought. But I wasn't as strong as him. And every time I had something, I just took that drink or that drug. It just, and everything went away. And that's why I did it. And so when I started drinking, and I remember the first time that I got drunk. 2 buddies, we went into a camp, and they had been drunk the night before and hungover, and they thought it would be funny. We'll get Terry drunk tonight. We'll tell him, because I stole some liquor out of my father's 66er, and then I put it back filled it with water, thought I'd get away with it, and put it in the freezer. So I got caught. But before that, I had got this bottle, and they were drinking out of their own bottle, and they were guzzling it. the camp, and I'd never drank before, so I was drinking it, feeling good. They were laughing at me. I was drunk. I ended up passing out. They put ketchup in my hair. I was passing. But come to find out, they were drinking water the whole night. And I was drinking rum trying to keep up with them. I didn't want them to think that I couldn't drink what they could drink. And that's how it started. And then I started working when I was 16, banding, or I think the first year I worked down to Dewey's and Cecil's packing lobsters for a couple of weeks, and then I went banding, and then I did some sword fishing in the summer, and I started to make my own money. And last 2 or 3 years of school, I was Mr. Popularity because I bought everybody everything. I never had a cent at the end because I spent it all like 17-year-old kid with $20,000, and I never ever had a cent ever because I just spent it on everybody because I wanted to be accepted, I wanted to be liked. And so that just went on, and my other friends kind of started growing up, and I just didn't. I stayed in that cycle. I just wanted the party to keep going, and I didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to change, and I didn't know how to cope with anything. So I knew that I was happy when I was drinking and when everyone was around me. And as I got older, my friends started moving on, and I stopped running with harder crowds or whatever because I was 24, 25 and not married and never had nothing to keep me tied down to anything. So I just got running with the same type of people. And then one night, the first time I used cocaine, the person I was with did not want me to use it. He said, "Terry, you don't need it. You're bad enough when you drink." He said, they tried to talk me out of it. As soon as he left the room, I talked to the guy. I said, "Sell me something." He said, No. The guy said, "No, I can't." And I said, No, I'll give you an extra 100 if you sell me, like. And he said, "No, I can't." I said, "No, I'll buy 3 grams then and give you an extra 100. He said, "No, I can't." I said, "I'll buy 6 grams. He said, "Well, fuck the guy. Go get the money and I'll give it to you." When he come back, I have 7 grams of cocaine, and I'd never done it before. In my pocket, every pocket. Didn't know where it was. All that in my pocket. At the end of the night, we couldn't find a cab. We was at the Digby Pines at the time, to the Warfight rally. We couldn't find a cab on the way back. So I said, "I'll find us a way home," fucked up, drunk. And I flagged down a cop car. And the cop got mad at first, and he said, "I ain't no taxi." I said, No, I'm not saying you are, but I'm doing you a favor, because us idiots are going to cause you trouble later on in the night. If you take us back to the hotel, we'll be out of your hair, and you won't have to deal with us. I'm just thinking ahead. And the cop said, "Get in." He drove us to the Pines. I got out, and everyone was coming down or whatever, said, "I wish we had more drugs." And I had a dress shirt on with a pocket in the front of it. I reached in, didn't know it was there, had a bag of cocaine in my pocket. I got in the car. Everyone said, "Are you crazy? You got it?" "Well, I didn't know." I said, "But good now." And that's how it started. And it didn't start right away from that. I got scared after. I felt guilty. I knew. And it's a horrible, horrible come down. You feel like God when you first take it, and then you feel like you're in hell when you're coming off it. It's horrible. But it's the first, when you're doing it, is awesome. It's the law of nature, right? What goes up must come down. And you do. And I didn't like to come down. So I stayed away from it for like 6 or 7 months or something like that. But I remember how it made me feel. And then I kept doing it. And then it come to a point I couldn't stop doing it. And then when I was first into it, it was a different scene than I come to when I relapsed, but I'll get to that. But it was kind of a party scene, but it was, like I said, I was losing myself and I knew it, but I didn't know how to deal with it, and I just kept going. And then eventually I lost control, and at the end, when I got sober the first time, I had a coke-induced psychosis. I didn't sleep for 5 or 6 days, didn't eat, and I lost my mind. It's like a bipolar episode, pretty much the same thing. But some people come back from it, some don't. I did. I got lucky. But yeah, I had 2 ounces of coke on me, and I thought I was going to sell it. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was 28. I was out of it. I was on one, and I was paranoid and thought people were coming for me. Everything, and I was up in my room doing it. Mom and them didn't know. They knew what I was doing, but they didn't know to what extent and what I had. And I just dropped to my knees, and I said, God, either help me or take me. I said, I can't do this anymore. And I don't know if it was the psychosis or a spiritual awakening. I can't say that to this day, but I know after I did, something come over me. It wasn't me, it was something else. And I was completely sensible. And I walked in and I said, Dad, I'm going to tell you some stuff. It's the truth. Believe it. Whatever I say after, don't believe me. Do exactly what I say. And you gotta do it right now. And I said, this is what I got, cocaine, flush it. I paid for it. I don't know anyone. It's not, just get rid of it. I'm going to kill myself. And I'm going to overdose. And I said, I need help. I'll go to detox. I'll go. And this was when there was still a detox in Yarmouth. Now they have a day program or whatever. But at the time there was. And they would take you on the day then. Now, the last time I went to go, they told me 2-3 months wait, 2-3 week wait, maybe 6 weeks. Well, good, you can see me at my funeral. I mean, where I was. But that time, I was lucky that that I could get in, and they took me to the hospital through the emergency room because I was starting to have seizures and coming down, and I guess I was, according to Dad and my brother who were there, they had me on a heart monitor or whatever, and they had me whatever. I guess I flatlined, but I come back, and no one was in the room but Dad and my brother, and the doctors come running, but by that time I had come back, and I don't remember any of that. I don't remember anything, and all I remember is waking up in detox and not knowing how I got there. And I said, well, I ain't staying here. Let me the fuck out of here, sorry. I said, that's it. I had to be, that's what I said. And the nurse who knew me, because I had went to detox before that, I left it out when I was 22. I was drinking, and I was in a situation that I wanted to get out of. And I thought by saying I was an alcoholic, I could get out of that situation. And without having to quit where I was or whatever, because I was drinking all the time in the situation. So I went into detox. About 3 days in, I felt guilty, and that was the same nurse I see that time. And she told me, I said, I shouldn't be here. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm just using it for an excuse. She said, well, will you indulge me for a second? I have this little quiz. I just want you to do this. And do you mind? I said, no, give me the quiz. So I did it, and it was like 20 questions. If you answer 7, you might be an alcoholic. 14, it's worse, whatever. But it says on it, you're the one that calls yourself an alcoholic. It's not up to us. But I answered 14 yes, and out of 20. And she said, I'm not going to call you an alcoholic. That's not my job. But I will tell you, you don't have to feel guilty about being here. So I stayed. But about 3 months in, and my father firmly believed it was a matter of self-control because he did it. But he had said, I've never agreed with a man in my life. We always argued everything. That was just our relationship. He said, you're going to go with your friends. You're missing the time you're supposed to be with your friends, party or whatever. That's what he did. You just have to stop when you want to. And I said, you're right. Because I wanted to drink again. And I wanted to go, so I agreed with him, and I went. So then I'm back in detox the second time, and it was the same nurse working, and she said, I knew you'd be back. I said, what do you mean you knew I'd be back? She said, I knew if you didn't get it that time that you'd be back here. Worse. And I was. And I said, I don't care, I'm leaving. I don't want to be here. And she said, well, if you stay the night, I'll give you a cup of Valium for the night. Ooh, I think I'll stay the night. So I stayed the night. And when I woke up the next day, I started to realize what had happened and how far it had come. and how worried my family was and everybody, and I made a decision to go to rehab. And I went to Ledgell, and that's how me and Adam originally met. He was working at Ledgell at the time. And I came in with the desire that time to get sober. I wanted it. I did. I didn't want to continue down that road. But wanting it and doing it are two very different things. And it's not easy to change everything. And I went through the program. They wanted me to stay 45 days or 60 days. I had to get back at Lobster, and I had to do it. I was just going to go get my 30 days in, leave, be sober, clean, and that'd be the end of it. That's what I thought. I was wrong. But I thought I could handle it. And I did my 30 days. I went to 12-step programs, and it helped, and it worked for a while, but I wasn't ready, and I relapsed. But I felt guilty, and immediately when I relapsed, I went back. And I stayed longer this time. I stayed for 4 or 5 months. I did sober living. I did whatever I had to do. So, and then I got a year. And on my year birthday, someone I was working with, I was working in the Valley then, helping at Ledgell also, and going there and kind of going back and forth. I was working in a job Adam had found for me down there. And I got hooked up with a guy I was helping in the program, and I thought he wanted to go talk about programming, and he wanted help. I knew he was struggling. I knew he had slipped a few times, and I went with him, and he had, next thing I knew, he dropped coke in front of me. And my first thought was get the fuck out of the truck, or like get out of there, you gotta leave. But I'm like, no, that looks weak, whatever, I can handle it. So I said, no, I don't want none, just take me home. Like he said, and about 5, it felt like an eternity. It was probably 4 or 5 minutes. I was like, give me one then. But if you're gonna give me one, we're going right to the liquor store, and that gram ain't gonna do much. We'll go right back where you got it. We'll get 3 more. And that's what I did, and that's why he did it. And I felt horrible. I missed my year birthday sober, which I had someone speaking for me, and people showing up, something like this, but it's for a 12-step program. And I missed it. So I was embarrassed. I felt like I had failed my parents, like I had broke their heart. So and I had called out and we had talked after it happened, and I got back on my feet. I never went back to rehab that time. I just stopped, and I got 4 years in after that. But one thing that something had happened to me after that I didn't realize at the time, but it kind of kept me from giving back or giving forward, because I was scared that if I made myself vulnerable, people would take advantage of it. And if I helped someone, so I just never. And then I started to back away from the program and the people that I was helping, and people that were helping me, and I started to go, just thought I was be all right. And then I started to get anxiety, which I never knew I had it, because I started drinking when I was 13, 14. And I don't remember much of my childhood. Like I said, I did, but I didn't know what anxiety was, because I always, when I was in any crowd, I would always have a drink in my hand. And then I would be fine. Like I said, if this was beer sitting up here instead of water, there'd be like 8 bottles sitting there. I was doing that. And so I guess where I'm going with that is my life started to fall apart again, and I didn't have the alcohol or the drugs to relieve it. I didn't have nothing. So I got to a point where I didn't have no cravings. They had left. I didn't crave drugs. I didn't crave alcohol. But I was struggling with life. I didn't know how to deal with it. And it come to a point where I thought it was kill myself or drink or something. I said, maybe a drink will help. And I still didn't want that. I didn't want to do the cocaine or the hard drugs. I was glad to have that monkey on my back. But I thought, you know, if I can have a few drinks, that will relieve my stress here and there. Like, I thought back to when I was 14, 15, when it was fun. And that's what it would be. And that's what it was for a little bit. Things went fine. The stress left. I stopped having panic attacks. I didn't have any anxiety. But, as anything, it started to get more and more. I started wanting it more and more. When I got time off, I drank. I hid it from a lot of people. They didn't know I was drinking. And that I didn't think I was capable of. Because I always, like, everyone knew I couldn't hide anything. But I was doing it because I had a necessity that I wanted to do it, and then I had convinced people, even my counselor that I was working with at the time, that it was okay to drink, because I can convince anyone of anything when I want it. And that's what I did. With myself, I was convinced that it was helping me, and I had beat it, and I didn't have to do AA or what anyone does or 12-step. I beat it, and I can control it. And I had myself convinced of that. It was a lie. I didn't. And I ended up somewhere where drugs was. I was drinking. I had no defense. All my inhibitions were lowered, and I did it because I remember how good it felt. And I felt guilty, and the same exact way I got addicted the first time. It went the same exact way. I didn't do it for a while, for a month or so, and then I did it again. And I did it again, and then I was way back to where I was and worse. And when I'd left the drug scene from 8 years ago till this time, it was a totally different world. It's totally got harder. It's a lot of people that I was using coke with, then they started using crack, and for some reason, I didn't like to smoke it because I didn't like the high. I was lucky. And everyone said the same thing about giving me cocaine. Don't give Terry that. That's the last thing he needs, because that's 10 times worse. And I could snort what people could smoke. And I could give away what people could. So I went back in the same way, but it was a little different this time. Because I had just give up on myself or any hope of changing or anything. I just completely dove into it. And there was like I said, when I come into it the first time, I would spend it on everybody, alcohol, drugs, I'd just give it away. The second time is turned, because I knew people were taking advantage of that. I didn't care, but I knew that if I was going to survive and do it, that I'd have to learn and adapt. So that's what I started to do, but it was killing me to be that type of person, but that's human nature, you adapt. So I started to pick up on what people were doing, and not everybody in every situation, and there was people that treated me good in it, but they did what they had to do to survive, and I understood that, so I was able to actually do it in a way I ended up in a lot of bad situations in the end of it, but I would get myself out of them with my ability to talk my way out of it, or because people liked me, because my personality carried me through it in a way. But I didn't care if I lived or died, and still it didn't help. So it was almost like if someone shot me, that'd be great, because I couldn't do it to myself, because I didn't want to put my family through that. But if someone else would do it, I was a manipulator to the end. A good one. That way someone shoots me, they get the blame. Everyone hates them, and it ain't my fault. So I didn't care. And that's where I was. So I didn't, and I got robbed and then and beat up, and it was out of I was up for 4 days, and normally that would have never happened to me, but I didn't know where it was. I stand up. I fought my way out of it, and the guy I was with, he said, Terry, man. And I always thought he was crazy. And we looked at it, but we were good friends, but I always thought he was the one I had to keep in line. And he looked at me and said, you got to stop doing drugs because it's dangerous. You're going to get me and you killed, and more importantly, me. And that really hit me. because I'm like, wow, like, how did I get here? And I said, I can't believe you're saying this to me. He said, I can't believe it either, but here we are. And so after all that, this was right up pretty well at the end of lobster, and I was going lobstering during it and doing my job. At times, I don't know how I did it, but I did it, and most didn't know till the end because I was hiding it because I had to. And I wanted to do my job, and so I would just turn it off somehow and go do what I had to do, and then go back and live a life of Breaking Bad at the night. And it caught up to me, and I had a call from a friend. I don't mind, she won't mind me saying, and Sarah called me, and I was in a crisis at the time, trying to figure it out so I didn't get shot or something happened, like it was, anyway. And I was in a mess, and she called me, and I don't know why I answered to this day. But the same thing happened that when I dropped to my knees and asked God to help me that first time. I done that morning again. I didn't have that white light or whatever happened that time, but she asked me, for some reason I said I'm going to call her back. And when I called her back, I broke down. I couldn't lie, and I told her the truth of everything. And I said, half you hearing about me? No, it isn't true, but it's been bad. And I have been running, I have been using, and I was broken, I needed help, and so I called her back, and I called my sister, and I called them guys, and I said, I will do an intervention. And the day of the intervention, I ended up almost, well, I was using that morning. I said I wasn't, but I was. That was the truth. And I almost didn't make it. And it was a complete shit show that day, again. And I was trying to navigate it, and I wanted to show up, but my plan was to go there, tell them I'm all right, don't need this, talk my way out of it like I always do, and go back to what I was doing, because I wasn't ready. I didn't care, and that was my plan. I can talk my way out of this, I can go into it, I can mend bridges or whatever, make it look like I'm going to try on my own, and then continue to do what I was doing under the rug. But that day just got crazy, and I almost never made it, and I'm like, I can't keep doing this. And I have to make a choice. So I told him I needed help, but I didn't have the money at the time to do it, and I didn't want to ask anyone for anything, because I had done it the first time. I'd paid everyone back, and I was lucky the first time, but I'd already done it, and I'd failed. And in my mind, I had failed. But that's not how recovery works. It is a process, but I didn't want to ask, and they offered. And I just said yes. I had planned to talk my way out of it, but I didn't. I just told them I would. And I went back to detox, and I felt like, not detox, I had detoxed to my sisters because, like I said, they told me, I could get in 4 to 6 weeks. I knew that wasn't going to work. And Crosby doesn't have a detox at the time, so you have to blow sober. And I knew that I couldn't do that on my own, so I stayed in my sister's and pretty much detoxed there. And I went into rehab, back to treatment, feeling sorry for myself, and head between my legs, pretty much defeated. And I think a lot there didn't think I was going to make it this time. I think that a lot didn't. I know that they didn't. Not because, but because of how I felt, because of where I was. I didn't think I was going to make it. I didn't think I could do it this time. And what changed for me was about a week and a half in of feeling sorry for myself. And I told them, because after you're allowed to go to the store after 11 days of pissing clean and clean, they allow you to leave. And I told them, don't let me leave. Don't let me out the door, because I probably ain't coming back. I don't know where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do, but if you let me leave, probably not a good idea. And one guy said, no one's ever said that before. Because I knew what I was going to do. But about the 15th, 16th day, and I got a call, and I wasn't supposed to have my phone all the time, but I did get it at times, and that was an agreement we had made because my sister and that didn't want me, because I had trouble breaking off connections with people and didn't want me still involved in that world and with certain people. One person who I considered a friend and still do, and was struggling, I always talked to him, and the night before he passed out on his front lawn, and he was telling me the yarn, and he was in bad shape when I was talking to him, and his uncle picked him up, and he said, you need help. And he said, no fucking shit, I need help. What, like, I can figure that out. He said, well, why don't you get it? And it was his uncle. And he said, do you got $14,000, Uncle Trump? He said, I ain't got it. And that made me, sitting in rehab, stop feeling sorry for myself, because I said, I'm very lucky that people did that for me. And I'm really grateful. And I really appreciate what they done. Because a lot in addiction have burnt every bridge they have. They've screwed over every person, even no matter how hard they tried, no matter what. They burnt those bridges, and people started to believe that they couldn't help them. There was no help for them. And for some reason, people still had faith in me. And then I stopped feeling sorry for myself. And I said, I'm lucky. Why did this, I'm very lucky. Why God allowed me to get this that other people can't. And I believe the reason was so I could be a voice for the people that can't. And that's what I want to do. And that's what I think as a community, it's our responsibility to do. Because I don't like when they call addiction a disease. Because they say it's like cancer, and it gets political, and people get offended. And they say it's not. My father died of cancer. But I will say, and I don't think anyone would argue, it's a mental illness. And a lot of times mental illnesses are what causes the addiction, the underlying issues. And if someone's like talking to their toaster, you don't question their morality or their character. You know something's wrong with them. You don't, if they say something mean or something that they wouldn't normally say out of their mind, you pay no heed to it because you know they're sick. You know something's wrong with them. It's the same with addiction. They're not in their right mind. I wasn't in my right mind. And that's what the community needs to know. And they need treatment. People need treatment. If they have a mental illness, they need treatment. They need to treat it. And if you treat it, it will go into remission like anything else. It's contingent on your spiritual condition, I believe. And that's what I'd like to do. I'd like if someone says I want to get help, which is, I can tell you for a fact, no one's going to come in and say, I want help and not really want it. If they're doing their drugs and running, they're not going to come in and say, I want to go to treatment and spend 45 days sober. Once in a while, someone will, because the judge told them to. That does happen. But even some of them do realize, not as many as the people that want it, but even some of them, it does stick. It plants seeds, is the thing. It plants seeds. It plants good seeds. And it shows you a different way. It shows you a different way out. And it shows you a different way to live. And you make real friendships and real connections with people. And that's what people need. That's what people who are hurting need. Someone to help them up. When a kid falls down, you don't look at the kid and say, well, some do. But you pick them up. You hug them. You say, and that's what these people need. That's what I needed, and that's what people did for me, and I was lucky, very lucky. And what really, and this is what I'm going to finish with, what changed in treatment for me, and I think Adam see it, and it probably happened, I had a complete breakdown. Like, and everything had happened about, I'd done a 42-day program, and it was probably 30 days in. Had I not done the longer program, one of the people that worked there, we always went back and forth, and she said, Terry, what would it look like if you were well? And I tried to intellectualize it. I said, well, what is well? It's an artificial construct. She said, don't intellectualize it, just answer the question. And I thought about it, and I don't know, because I've never been well. I didn't even know how to answer it. And I said to an older guy that was on the staff that worked on it, we always went back and forth. I said, Richard, why would she do that to me? He said, well, that's because she doesn't like you, obviously. Kidding with me, but that wasn't it at all. It was because, and I got thinking, and I said, I can't answer the damn question. And that's when it really changed for me, that I've done everything I could on the other side. And I said, why don't I actually give myself a chance? Why don't I was ready to go like to the dark side, if you know like that. I was ready. I was going to do what it took. And I was there. That's a whole lot harder than doing what's right. Doing what's wrong is hard, because you know it's wrong, but you do it to survive. But that's hard. Well, doing what's right is really actually easy. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, sometimes it's inconvenient, but it's easier. And I think I broke down crying in his office, and I said, I want to do it this time. I want to do it. And I want to be able to help people get the same opportunity I did. I want everyone else to feel that freedom. And that's why I want to do this. And the fund we want to start is to raise money for people who want to go to treatment and get help. Or maybe someone who needs to see a counselor or talk about trauma. And I know another friend that tried to get a counselor through the government, whatever, through the system, and it was a 6 months wait, and if they didn't do that day, then they never got it, and they had some other medical appointment scheduled for the same day, so they couldn't get it. And I think that's horrible. And I think everybody should have an opportunity to get well if they want, and it benefits the community. Because everything that addiction, all the trouble addiction causes in the community, we pay for it. Taxes, like the police, the fire department, sometimes the ambulance. Well, the Mexican fire department in my case, but that's a different story. Apparently, don't throw cigars in the wind. I can tell you that. It's addiction causes a lot of problems, and in the society. And we've always attacked the supply. We've always said, I'll tell you what, you take one dealer out, three's going to take their place. It's not the dealer. If there is a demand, there will be a supply. Everyone knows that. So if you want to deal with the drug problem, then deal with the demand. Get people off of it. Give them a chance to get off at least. And that person will contribute and help the community instead of hurt it. And they'll be appreciative. And they'll give back. It'll pay it forward. And that should be a thing. It's not going to be a handout. The people we help will pay it forward. They'll pay back what they can when, and if they can't, they'll do it in some other way. But I can tell you, being sober, I'm very grateful, and I want to pay it forward. And it's a complete change of my beliefs. It's a complete change of me. So I think that's pretty much it, and I think I'm going to hit my time on perfect. And now I'm going to introduce Adam, who's been a friend for a long time and helped me a lot. And when I was going into treatment, I was going to go back to the place I was before. It had change of management, but I had called Crosby House too. But I suppose that once Adam and other people there figured out there's a couple that were at Ledgeo when I was there that it was me, they called me personally and asked me to come and said, I think we got a great program here, Terry. It's cheaper. I'm not trying to poach you from one place to another or anything like that. You do what's best for you. But he said, I think this program is what you need. And he was right. It was. And I'm so glad I did it. And what Crosby has too is a great aftercare program, which is the most important thing. You can go dry out, go to rehab, do all the stuff, and that was kind of the issue. The first time I moved away from Crosby has a 2-year aftercare program where you can call anytime. So if you eat 2 o'clock in the morning, you're off or you need to talk to someone, you can call there. Because who else are you going to call at 2 o'clock in the morning? Someone might say, Terry, if you got any problems, call me. But if I call them 2 o'clock in the morning, they're going to say, fucking Terry. They're going to hang. I mean, who are you going to do that to? But they're working. And I'm sorry about the language, I'm really trying, but I can't smoke and swear, I can't properly express myself. A couple swear words is good for me. And so yeah, it really helped me, and Crosby really helped me in the aftercare. When I call, they answer. It's someone to talk to in 24 hours. That's amazing. And it really helps. And it's not, I call 2 o'clock in the morning because I'm thinking about using sometimes, but I haven't this time for some reason. It's been easier, knock on wood, as I say, this time. But still, I've been off on for different reasons. And I can just call and I use it. And I say, well, I get my money's worth that way. Or someone else's money worth. I'm calling. So I have no guilt of calling. And, and it's a really great program, and Adam's done a great job at. He knows too that he's been through it. That aftercare's where it's at, and the program's really structured around that. And like I said, it's helped me a lot. I think it can help a lot of people, and I'll stop talking and give Adam a chance, which he's used to me taking up all the time.
Thank you very much, Terry. I'm not used to speaking with a mic, so can you guys hear me okay? I'm also hearing impaired, and my partner's dog ate my hearing aid, so if I start yelling at you, just tell me to tone it down a little bit. We're here tonight because a young man suffered with addiction for a very long time, and a young man found some hope. And a young man wants the other people in his community to find that hope as well. And I am so proud of you, Terry, for everything that you're doing, and it's going to pay off for you. And all of you. I mean, I've done this a few times, these community events, and sadly, quite frankly, it's quite often to a room that's almost empty. And that's what I was expecting when I came down here. So you scared the bejesus out of me when I saw this many people in the room. But I sat here and I thought, well, if Terry can do this, man, I've got to be able to do it as well. So, for you, thank you very much for showing up for your community. But it also tells me, as someone else pointed out, that a lot of people's lives are being affected by addiction in their community. Thank you very much, Terry, for sharing and being so vulnerable with people, and the gentleman that opened as well, being vulnerable, because that's so important. There's a real stigma around addiction, and that's one of the first things that we need to do. Quite often when I tell people what I do, they kind of give me a bit of a look of pity, but they have no idea that I have the greatest opportunity in the world, because I get to meet some of the most inspiring people that I could ever imagine. I think I'm here to talk to you a little bit about addiction, try to maybe help some people have a little bit of understanding what addiction is and how it can cause so much problems in our community, and talk a little bit about our program as well. I grew up, as Terry mentioned, I'm a recovering drug addict as well. I grew up in a community probably much like this over in Parker's Cove, a little fishing community. And growing up, we all drank the same. Everyone drank alcoholically in the fishing community when they're teenagers. That's kind of what you do, a bit of a rite of passage. But as we got older, and the people I was drinking with and my friends and using drugs, we dabbled in drugs, but nothing too awful serious. as they started getting families and getting careers, wanting to build homes, and when they started to wanted to pursue all the dreams that we all had, they were able to kind of plug in the jug and start drinking and just on the weekends. I did not have that ability. I still had the same dreams. However, alcohol and drugs had taken a priority in my life. So although I got married and I had a family, that family and that marriage and that home was never able to take a priority in my life. Because the difference between me and my friends was that I had an illness that I was born with, genetically predisposed. My dad was not an addict. I'm probably a workaholic, but there were addicts in my family. And these genes get passed on. And this illness, it is a genetic predisposition, but it also takes environmental factors. And that's the use. So for someone like myself, it's an illness of the reward center of the brain. So when someone says they have an addiction, what that means is that the reward center and the pleasure center in the brain has attached itself to the immediate gratification that comes with a substance or a behavior as a coping mechanism and a source of pleasure. What happens at the same time and with the development of the illness is that it stops relying upon the normal ways of dealing with stress and the normal ways of experiencing pleasure. So what happens over time as these pathways are getting formed in the brain and the singleness of purpose of addiction is taking place, the human being is also becoming weaker with regards to its ability to navigate and manage life. So quite often when I ask people, what's your trigger? They'll say, waking up. What they're really saying is that I am so overwhelmed with life's simple tasks that I can't function anymore. And that's because they have become dependent upon a substance or a behavior as a way of dealing with stress. Now this progresses because the reward center of the brain hijacks the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that is responsible for logic and reasoning. Because this part of your brain thinks this is about survival. We programmed it that way. You know, by taking a drink, by using drugs when we wanted to fit in, when we wanted to deal with stress. You know, it can simply go back at the end of the day and you have a beer and all of a sudden you relax. So for the addict, that relaxation and that reward is going to get compounded and become stronger. So after a while, your brain only identifies the substance as a way of survival. We've taught ourselves that's how we survive, that's how we experience pleasure, that's how we deal with stress. But what addiction does is it starts to create stress in our lives. It starts to create chaos. It starts to create pain within our relationships, within our job. We don't have any money left, do we, Terry?
No.
We're broke. But because the addiction is already impacting, that illness is already there, how the brain responds is as soon as it experienced the stress of my partner mad with me, my boss upset with me, or realizing I spent all my money and couldn't make my mortgage payment, rather than what a non-addict would think, I gotta stop that, you know, I need to change that. The mental illness takes over and says, I need to drink, I need to use more drugs. This is why all of you that have seen an addict in your life, the worse the situation gets, the more they use, whereas a normal person would change that. This is how people like myself and Terry get on the brink of death's doorstep. This is how people who grow up with aspirations of being a loving, caring person and having a family and career and success end up living in a tent. I lived in a tent, going to the food bank. You know, you lose your humanity in addiction, is what really happens. And then you lose hope. And kind of to get ahead of ourselves and what can the community do, we need to give people hope. And that's why it's so important for Terry to do this and the gentleman over here to be vulnerable. And this is why those of us that work at the Crosby House, the majority of us are in recovery. Our main job as counselors and staff working in the field is not to educate people. Anybody can do that. It's not to support them. It's anybody can do that. But our job is to inspire hope with them. So you'll find at the Crosby House, those of us that work there are very vulnerable. Terry knows as much about me as I know about him, and it ain't very pretty all the time, no. And as with my illness, it got to the point, I went to the Crosby House 3 times. I was there at the old Crosby Center in '96. I was one of the first clients to go through the new house in 2006 and 2007. And then I ended up living up there for 2 years, close to the community, close to the center, so they could take care of me. So when they reached out to me a few years ago and asked me if I would help them out with the staff shortage, it was very easy for me to stop what I was doing and have an opportunity to give back to a place that has given me everything I have in my life. And I've had a lot. I had nothing and no hope, as Terry can recognize. And now I have hope, and I have people, and everything I have, I owe to the Crosby House, the meetings, and people like Terry who were there to help. So I guess that's an opportunity to talk a little bit about the Crosby program. So Crosby House Society is run by a group of volunteers. It's a volunteer board. It was started by volunteers. The Crosby Center was a government-run organization that was an inpatient 28-day program. At one point in time, when harm reduction strategies started happening in Nova Scotia, I remember I was doing my placement there as a student, and when they brought methadone maintenance and harm reduction to the province, and the province eventually abandoned abstinence-based recovery and shut the Crosby Center program down. A group of volunteers, former staff, bought a property and started the new program up. Many years later, in 2006, they opened the doors. We are now an 11-bed facility. We just purchased the property next door to add 7 more beds to our program. What we don't like is a waiting list, and we always have 2 or 3. We have people waiting 2 or 3 weeks to get into our program, and anyone that struggled with addiction knows how devastating 2 or 3 weeks can be when you're trying to get some help. So we're expanding and trying to get more beds. We want to get more services. We want to be able to do things that maybe our government should be doing, and having more detox beds, more long-term aftercare programs, and more outpatient services. That's a process, and we're starting, hopefully within a couple of months, we'll be opening up with the extra beds. The program is designed, I think, first of all, to give people the experience and the understanding that recovery and being sober is rewarding. It's fair to say we have a lot of fun at the Crosby House. We want to give people the skills. We have 2 programs. There's a 4-week program which gives people the basics of recovery, and then we have an additional 2-week program which people that can or choose to, or maybe it's appropriate for, have an extra 2 weeks where they can focus specifically on their specific needs. And as Terry mentioned, the aftercare program. So the Crosby is really a 2-year program. The inpatient program is the inpatient program, but then you leave, you go back to your community, and this is where we try to provide you as much support as we can. Last year we started, I think maybe it was earlier this year, we started reaching out to people daily. So when a client leaves our program, we reach out to them every day for the first month. The counselor they have in program, we'll touch base with them. If you're having a great day, fantastic, carry on. If you're struggling, we have an opportunity to intervene in those early days of being back in their community. If it's needed after that time, then we'll extend that. If they're doing okay, we're going to hand them over to our family coordinator, who will reach out to them regularly, kind of based on how they're doing. But his job is also to kind of get them involved back into the program. So we want people giving back, being speakers at our meetings, and so on and so forth. We have 2 meetings every week which the clients can take part in, either on site or online. We also have a family program because we recognize that there is a great correlation between not just the skills that the client has, but that the family has as well. So the more we can inform this family about addiction, the more skills we can give that family, then the higher success rates we're going to be. And we work with the family while they're in treatment as We try to organize as many activities as we can. So much of recovery is about connection, so helping people build connections to the program is really important. We have activities like bowling and hikes. We have retreats and seminars throughout the year that we do, and we're trying to build an alumni service committee so that Crosby alumni in all the different communities can also organize activities within that community just to keep people connected. I think that's all the information that I had with regards to the program, and I know that with this many people here, there are probably lots of questions. So maybe we'll turn it over to the floor and people can ask some questions. Is that what we should be doing now, Amy? She's running up here, so.
I have some. So on the backs of everyone's chairs, on the backs of everyone's chairs is a QR, well, not everyone's, every other chair, is a QR code. If you had a question, you could scan it with your phone and ask the question, and then we get them here. So I have some questions already been submitted by folks here, so I'll ask those first, and then if we have time after that, we'll do it popcorn style in the audience for anything that's bubbled up.
Perfect.
Perfect, okay. Let me get my readers on. So, first question is for both of you. How do we change community attitudes about people who use substances so that they can have a community to come back to?
Any thoughts on that, Jerry?
I guess I kind of addressed it too in my speech. People should more treat it as a mental illness and more treat it as someone who is sick, who's trying to get well, who is, and treat them just like they would anyone else that was sick trying to get well. And don't throw their disease. You're not going to say, some people do, but most ain't going to say, how's that cancer going? You die yet? Or, so it's the same with addiction. Like people just treat them as a human being. Treat them as a human being, and care and ask how they're doing. But know it's a process, and know if they're trying to get sober, then they want to. They wouldn't, and that's what I got.
Yeah, I mean, and I can appreciate we're hard to like. We're in active addiction and we're in your community. It's very easy for people to develop a stigma towards us because we're terrorizing your community. Your roads aren't safe. We're robbing your stores. We're not easy people to like. But that's why it's so important for, again, people like Terry and this gentleman to come out and say, you know what, we are human beings. That it's an illness that can happen to anybody, and we need to let people see the human and recovery side of this. But awareness and education in the community is so important.
So someone's asking, how can I help someone with an addiction? What can I do to help them when they're feeling tempted?
Any thoughts on what helped you, Terry?
Just people being there for me. Just people listening and not judging, but listening, and directing me to places where I could get the help, and people that just knowing people cared about me was a big thing for me, and that gives you the courage and the strength to move forward and do something about it. And patience, I would say patience is a big thing, because it is like Adam said, when you're running or whatever, you don't care, and you're gonna hurt people around you, people you love, people you don't like, but you're both. You just don't care. But if someone's reaching out to you and telling you that they have a problem and they want to fix it, then be there for them.
Yeah, I think, and realizing that it's normal for an addict to want to use drugs. I mean, it's been nearly 14 years this time since I've used any drugs. I still get triggered. I still get the thought. It's just all part of the disease. So not shaming them, recognizing that it's all right, and directing them to the right people. You might not be particularly the best person to support that, but they probably have a support person. They may have their counselors or their 12-step members that helps forward.
This one's for Terry specifically. what do you think parents or grandparents could be doing to help prevent their kids, grandkids from getting into drugs into the first place?
You sure that wasn't for Adam? This is a hard question, but I think talking to your kids, like my issue was, like I said, I never felt, not that I couldn't talk to my family, it just, we didn't talk about emotions. His dad didn't like to talk about emotions because of what he went through, and a lot of times I just felt I had nowhere to go, but not because I didn't, but that's how I felt. And I think it's more reaching out to people and telling them that you're there. And it's important at a young age for kids to know that they can come and talk to you and be open about what they're going through. And it's very common in this community. It wasn't everyone was that way, like buck up. Like, don't cry or you'll have something to cry about. Like, that's just how most people were raised in this room. But it doesn't work. We know that now. It's, and I'm not saying that you have to spoil them or that you have to always, but just listen. It's just listening and not judging. And sometimes, sometimes it is nothing, but it doesn't mean it's nothing to that kid at that time. If he's 9 years old, it's a big deal to him. And then when it is a big deal, they'll come to you. But when it's little things, and don't worry about that, that's just kid stuff. My dad told me that all the time, and it was. But when things happen, then I didn't want to talk about it, I think it's important to have a relationship with your kids. They know they can come to you anytime. But again, I don't think you can stop it. I don't think it's something that anything the parents can do. That's what they can do, but sometimes it just happens. Sometimes it's in our genes in a way too. When I had a bottle, I remember Teresa said when I come in, I was that kid that always wanted more. Before anything, I had a bottle, Mom would get me another one. Teresa used to babysit us, and I'd eat everything off my plate and eat off of Brandy's when I was a kid, and that's what I was like. That was part of my personality. So there's some things that it's a predisposition to addiction, was more. If it felt good, I wanted more. And that's something that the person has to come to on their own to change. And there's nothing anyone can do about that.
So under question for Adam, it said same, so the question is for you, of the same question about prevention for parents and grandparents.
Yeah, so I mean, early intervention is massive in the young developing brain. Education and awareness is key. We've got to be mindful of the message we're sending young people about addiction, about substances. I was excited to take my first drink because I saw that when my father took a drink, and again, he wasn't an alcoholic, but I saw that when he took a drink, he was relaxed. We promote alcohol and substance abuse quite often in our communities, but we're not providing the education about the downside of it as well. You got to remember that the person sitting in the crack house didn't start there. They started in your local legion, in your local community hall dance, maybe at a family function, maybe at a campfire, a very social event. But if they have the disease of addiction, that's where they may very well end up. So providing information and education for young people is absolutely massive as to, yeah, it feels good. However, this can be the consequence as well. Being aware that it is a genetic illness that can be passed on. If your family is prone to heart disease or diabetes, you're going to let your children know that so they can make choices around that as well. So it's really important that if you have addiction in your family, that your children are educated and aware. Both of my children, knowing that I was an addict, were very careful around their substance use. Genetically predisposed to become addicted. But because they are aware of the dangers, and I was always very open, they've always been able to make appropriate choices around substance use. And when they got stressed, they never relied upon it. So although they may be genetically predisposed, they didn't allow the environmental factors to create the disease. Yeah, it can happen at any time. I meet people who never develop addiction until they retire. Maybe they're a workaholic early, or their children have grown up and they've lost their purpose. Yeah, and I had something else here and I kind of lost it. Education, awareness, and building connections. So we do know that young people that get involved in other things, sports, other activities, kids, it's all about rewards. So if you can provide rewarding behaviors within your family, then that is going to decrease the chances of addiction, and get them off the video games. For heaven's sakes, we are grooming young addicts at a very young age these days, because children that are becoming addicted to video games are getting an abnormal amount of dopamine release. They're caught in a reward cycle and a stimulus cycle that isn't normal. So by the time they get older and get an opportunity to use drugs, the addictive cycle's already started. We've got so many young people today stuck in their parents' basement smoking dope and playing video games all day long. So this is something else. Monitor how much your child is playing a video game, because that's a very dangerous thing. We're normalizing THC use as if it's not a harmful drug. THC is probably killing more people than anybody else. They're not overdosing, but when they're 50, 60, 70 years old, developing heart disease and other illnesses associated with that, we just really have to educate people as to what addiction is. Just rant, sorry. I was waiting for that rant though.
No one asked me, but I'm gonna give you my 2 cents worth anyway. Being honest. One thing that you cannot do to your children is when you lie to them. When they ask you about your own use and your own history, be honest with them. You don't need to tell them everything. They don't need your big disclosure, but they do know the truth, because when their time comes, they'll trust you with what they're going through. I've lived that, and I know that to be true. Okay, there's a couple of Crosby House questions specifically. Crosby House is very expensive. That can make it inaccessible to some. Are there any support for folks who can't afford this option?
Unfortunately not at this point in time. There is an organization that will finance Crosby House. Again, one of the other things that we want to do is we want to create programming for people that cannot afford an inpatient program. And although we're expensive, we're probably a third of the cost of the other programs out there, because we're not for profit.
And also, I wanted to add on that, that's the purpose, some of the purpose of this town hall tonight is to raise money in the community for people, and Amy's been great to help me organize this. She's been awesome, and I was so worked up about speaking, I forgot to thank Sean for the wonderful introduction. And there's a lot of people in the community that I was surprised how many people, when I suggested this, just made it happen very quickly. She did too, and she deserves a round of applause for that. Yeah, this is to raise money for people who can't afford it, and we want to start a fund in a charity, more or less, a pay it forward type charity that we can, and Crosby's a non-profit, so that makes it great through this, that we can do it through them, and we can, as a community, give people help who need it.
And remember, our mandate is to help people suffering from addiction. So if you've got someone struggling with it, call us anyway. Even if you don't have 10 cents together, I still want people calling us, because quite often what we'll do is we'll find out what community you're from, where you are, and we'll try to get you connected with the resources. I had a conversation with a woman the other day from Cape Breton. She couldn't send her young child to the Crosby House, but we were able to utilize our resources, find out what counselors, what recovery support people were in their community, so we were able to connect them with something. So you call us anyway.
What is the eight?
We're still doing these questions, right? Someone had their hand
up,
so I didn't know.
I just wanted to say something. I phoned Crosby House just to inquire about their program and such, and they were very helpful in saying, even if I wanted to call about information for myself, they would give me counseling over the phone and such things for nothing. Like, they were very supportive and helpful in that manner, and I found them excellent.
Thank you.
So that falls actually into the question of what advice can you give family members whose loved ones aren't ready for recovery?
Don't deny your loved ones the suffering required to change, is the key. So, I mean, people change from addiction when they, in recovery world we call it the bottom, but what happens when people decide to change is that they meet some version of a crisis. And the problem, what we do out of love quite often is we try to protect our loved one from that crisis. And unfortunately, that crisis is exactly what you need, because, remember, it's an illness of the reward center of the brain that makes it think this is how I survive, regardless of what's going on, regardless of how their life is falling around them. And I was living in a tent, and I thought I was just doing just great, regardless of what's going on around them, they need that moment and that crisis of clarity to keep their mind open. And people get help when the intervention happens at the same time as that brief moment of clarity. And sometimes it's not very not very long. But what we have a tendency to do is try to enable our addicts and protect them from the consequences of their actions. And that's the last thing you should be doing. Creating firm boundaries around the addict, not letting them take over your life, not letting them commit you to support their addiction or what they're doing in any way, shape, or form is massive.
And I can't answer that any better, so.
What age level does Crosby House accommodate?
I think we tend to, it depends on the individual. We had a 17-year-old a while ago who we were concerned about his age, but after an interview that I had with him on the phone, I felt that this person had the maturity to work in our program, and it worked really well. One of the interesting things about young people is that the principle of conformity happens. So what happens when young people go into a program with some older people, they tend to sort of want to act more mature. So they'll do better in a program with mixed ages than all just adolescents.
And what types of drugs do you see most common coming to Crosby House?
In Nova Scotia, it's still alcohol and cocaine. Probably alcohol is still the most abused drugs up there as far as what we're seeing, but alcohol and cocaine.
I think that might be it. How do I help someone stay clean and not relapse? Which we've kind of.
You can't. To be honest, it's got to be their choice. Like Adam said, don't deny them that's brilliant. Don't deny them the suffering they want. They'll get to it, and you can be there. That's it. Don't enable them. If they're let them learn in their suffering. It sounds cruel, but and be here. And that's why when they're ready, that's when you got to be there, when they're ready. If they go back, that's what I had to do. I had to go back and learn. I wasn't ready. I needed a little bit more suffering. I needed a little bit more to scare me, and it was a lot more. But that's what I needed. And that's why I'm so passionate about starting this, that when people are ready, then that's when you can help them. But the worst thing is, if I'd have said, I'm ready to go, and everyone had said, well, I don't know, we can't help you, but we want you to get help, and I didn't have nobody to help me get into treatment, and I couldn't afford it, I'd be right back where I was. But I was lucky to have people to help me. And that's what they need. When they're ready, there should be some sort of support there that is there when they're ready. So they can, because that's a crucial point too. It comes and goes, and if no one's there when it comes, it might be 10 years before it comes again that they're ready. So that's what I think is really important.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think if someone has been clean and sober and they want to remain clean and sober, then if they have a support network in place, direct them to, we really want moms and dads to stay what they're good at, and that's being moms and dads. We want brothers and sisters and children and daughters to stay within their lane, but encourage people to kind of get back connected with the resources. Let their team and the recovery supports help the person, and you just kind of love them and help them understand. And remember, just if they are having a crave or they want to use, it's just a symptom of their disease, and it doesn't mean they're still not invested in their recovery.
That's it for the online questions. We can do it popcorn style if there's anyone in the audience that has any, no?
Sherry, I've known you since you were a kid, you did a great job. I'm loyal for that. Just in the community, I'm out of it, I would have no idea what's going on in the community. But as you, with your experience in the last few years, is the drugs in the community ramping up? Is it getting worse? What's your personal, opinion?
Well, yes, this is the quick answer. It's getting worse because it progresses. So drugs didn't come to this area for a long time for whatever reason. It's lucky. But then there's a lot of money in this area, so money and addiction. And people started, a lot went out west during when lobstering they got into coke out there. And they brought that addiction back here. And they created a demand. Like I said, and the demand creates a supply. So when people start going to get it, they'll go to the city to get it, they bring it back. And at that time, it was mostly snorting, but it progresses, and then it becomes crack, which is worse. Because, you probably snort. If you snort half an ounce in a day, I could do it, but I was one of the few. Because I give a lot away too, I didn't, but that's a lot. But to smoke it, you could smoke an ounce in 3 hours. So it creates more demand, and they go through it quicker, and then more money involved, and then you get crime involved, and it becomes worse. It becomes more dangerous, and it progresses. Addiction progresses, and yeah, the answer is it does, and it has, and it's going to get worse if we don't do something about it and start getting people help, because they're going to get worse, and there's worse things than crack, and it's coming. So as a community, that's the ones that if they're ready to get off, that's the time, because it can get a lot worse.
Thank you.
I have a question about how important is it for us as addicts to be vulnerable about our own pain and have a connection with other people around that vulnerability, like telling our personal stories, and along with that, self-acceptance. I find that going into pain and being vulnerable around pain, and then it's good that other people accept you and other people love you, but at some point seems to me there's a need to come into a fuller sense of self-acceptance, because a lot of addiction seems to me like a lot of it's self-rejection. Whether you're cutting yourself or whether you're drinking, it's self-harm. You can't say you accept yourself if you're harming yourself, right? And so I don't know what you would say about that. Like, is it important for people to delve rich and deep and thick into their own personal stories of pain and trauma and so on, and find a human connection around that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's key. I don't know how anybody gets clean without both self-acceptance and connection with other people. I mean, that's a big part of it, connection with whatever they have as a higher power. Shame is what drives addiction. So if you're sitting in shame over what you've done, if you're not in a place where you want to forgive yourself, then it's going to be really hard to break that cycle, because if you're ashamed of yourself for having this illness, you're never going to find a person worth doing the hard work for. You're not going to feel like that you are worth it. So yeah, self-acceptance, forgiveness is absolutely massive. And connection, this is where the 12-step communities become so valuable, why our aftercare program is such an important piece. There needs to be some sort of connection with other communities. Addiction is a very isolating illness. Even if that person is always out to the local pool room, he's still a very isolated human being, still very alone.
Yeah, I agree, and the only thing I would add to that would be, in a small community, I always found like people love to see people succeed, but the only thing they love to see better than people succeed is fail. And a lot of time in addiction, you fail and you go back, and people do beat people, or they like to point that failure out to make them feel better about themselves, and that can really hurt the addict. That can really drive them more into what they're doing. That validates their view of the world at the time. And I've come to learn that you can look at the world two ways. You can look at it, you can see the one jerk that was ignorant to you and say everybody's a jerk. Everyone's selfish. Or the one person that opens the door for you, and you could say everybody's nice. Everyone cares about somebody, and you can take that view and go with it, and you don't see the negative. But if you don't see the positive and you see the negative, then that's how you're going to react. And yeah, I think it's important as a community for people to forgive and recognize when someone's trying to change, and let them change. And when someone's willing to admit they made a mistake or done it, accept it. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and just, it's so important, as you mentioned, let people know that it's okay to be a human being. It's okay to make mistakes. I'll share a brief story that those of you that have been through the Crosby program have probably heard me say, but there was an occasion when my daughter was giving speeches, and she was doing this thing, and she said, I want to thank my mom for always being there for me. That was her mom's role. But she said, I want to thank my dad for showing me that no matter how far down you fall, you can always pick yourself back up again. And what an important, powerful message that is for the young people in the community, that it's okay to make mistakes, that you can pick yourself up and you can rise above that. It's okay to be human.
Last time I went to Crosby House, they didn't let people in that's on methadone or Suboxone. Has that changed?
We have always allowed people on methadone and Suboxone.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought, okay. I thought it was different.
Yeah, no. At our program, we still, we have someone on methadone right now. Yeah, as long as I've been there, I was there then, right?
No.
No, I wasn't, okay. Since I've been there, methadone and Suboxone have been acceptable drugs.
Do you still wean people off? Like, I was on Ativan and sleeping pill. Do you still wean people off those drugs?
That has changed, so people need to be they need to be weaned off and detoxed from their benzodiazepines before coming into program. For a lot of reasons I won't get into it, just we found that it was necessary, and we had more success when people would come in off that already, and yeah, so we don't house benzodiazepines at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Is there any more questions or comments even? If anybody has any comments they'd like to share? I, for one, I'm sure, I had never met Terry outside of maybe a month and a half ago. I didn't even know who Terry was. I might be the only person who didn't know who Terry Funk was, but I definitely, when Sarah had reached out and said Terry Howe, I'm like, I don't know Terry Howe. And I was like, oh yes you do, it's Terry Funk. I'm like, I definitely don't know a Terry Funk. Our paths have not crossed. But I'm sure glad they did. I can honestly say he made an incredible impression upon me the first time that we met. There was some things that he had said that it was as if my father was in the same room saying them to me. So I'm incredibly motivated and inspired by Terry. And I don't say that lightly, and most people in this room who know me know that I wouldn't say that lightly. I believe in his passion and his purpose to help our community, and however I can help make that come to fruition, I am committed to doing that. Terry talked briefly about a fund that is coming, and it is something very, it's in the works with the Nova Scotia Community Foundation. They will help us set up a fund that will help support people in their road to recovery, in their journey. And so there'll be more information on that to come. I also want to thank Paula and her gang. They're in the back. Before I forget, they have some naloxone kits, which if anybody wants any information on that or learn how to use them or want a kit, please see them before you scoot away. If there are no other questions or comments, we'll wrap up the evening and you'll be out of here a half hour before scheduled time, which is always a wonderful treat on a rainy, dark night with, I don't know about it, everybody's night vision, how that's going for them these days, but I, for one, I'm glad I only live 3 minutes from this property. I can't thank you all enough for coming out tonight. Just the incredible volume of you. There's 75 of you in this room who braved the rainy night to come out here to support Terry and to support our community, so I'm very encouraged. Terry, I hope this is the beginning. Well, honestly, no one is more surprised how tight I've become with Terry than me. Yeah. We're text buddies now. Yeah. This will not be the last that you'll see this dynamic duo in this community. We are partnering up and there's much more to come. If you're interested in being part of the committee, we need a committee of 7 to start this fund. If you're interested, please see Terry. Yeah, he's the man on that one. He'll be the face of the fund. No, he won't be the face of the fund, but he definitely is the passion.
I have no face.
Yeah, no, our community is the face. The best face forward I think that we have is our community. And I've seen the power of it within when we went through the wildfires together, so I know that we can rally again and support the people who need support in our community. Thank you.